say enough about my guys. They were awesome. I had the best team.
There were times when people were shooting at us and, you know, the next bullet could be yours.
Somebody's got to take that risk.
Ready.
Might as well be me.
Aim.
The Japanese would not surrender.
Fire.
You go to combat with anybody.
Ready.
You're going to be tight, sometimes tighter than
Aim.
you are with your own family.
Fire.
You can't beat experience, especially in a combat situation.
It's something you'll never, ever forget.
I know a whole heck of a lot more about Vietnam now than I did when I was there.
Never give up, no matter what kind of hardships you have.
We're in this together. Nowhere are those 4 words more significant than in war. The trust required in combat and the intense shared experience of battle forms a powerful bond. Over the next half hour, we'll examine these unique connections. No matter the conflict nor the era, they have one thing in common. These bonds are unbreakable, even in death. It is honor above all. We begin our special report just 2 weeks before the end of World War II. In July 1945, the celebrations over the victory in Europe had barely waned when U.S. troops and their allies were turning their manpower toward Japan. But before those weary forces were deployed to the Pacific, a classified mission forever changed the course of the war.
It was a secret weapon we were carrying. Nobody knew what it was, not even my captain.
Yet for all its significance, Paul Murphy was part of a mission that is still considered the U.S. Navy's worst tragedy at sea.
It's very important that our young people know about World War II.
Today, Paul Murphy lives in Broomfield and is the chairman of the U.S.S. Indianapolis Survivors Organization. During the war, he was a weapons expert aboard the Indianapolis. The heavy cruiser was the flagship of the 5th Fleet. In July of '45, she broke from the fleet to sneak alone across the Pacific on a top-secret mission.
We were carrying the components for the first atomic bomb.
After the successful delivery of that first operational A-bomb, the Indianapolis was headed to rejoin the fleet. The ship was speeding across the Philippine Sea on a quiet, moonlit night. At 14 minutes after midnight, on July 30th, 1945, most of the crew was sleeping when all hell broke loose.
We got hit by a submarine.
2 torpedoes from a Japanese sub ripped into the starboard bow of the Indianapolis.
I was in my bunk. I was knocked out of it.
Despite the violent explosions, Murphy found a close friend who had missed the chaos.
Sound asleep. He slept through the whole explosion. I woke him up, gave him my life jacket, and told him to go to his general quarters station. That was the last time I saw Paul.
The water would be the final resting place for many of the 1,197 men aboard the Indianapolis. An estimated 900 made it off the ship, but there wasn't time to release many life rafts.
We sank within 12 minutes.
So quickly, it's not certain whether a distress signal ever went out. Worse yet, because of the secrecy of her mission, few, if any, knew of the Indy's whereabouts or when she was due to return.
And so I lost my home.
Most men had grabbed a life vest, but little else. In the dark, they struggled to keep afloat amidst a sea of spilled fuel and oil.
I swallowed some of it. I threw up.
That would be the least of their worries. At sunrise, the first sharks appeared.
I could feel sharks swim by me and bump my legs.
At first, the sharks picked on the dead.
That's the ones that the sharks enjoyed the most because they were not fighting back.
Murphy struggles to this day, talking about the sharks and the screams of his shipmates as they were pulled under. By the heat of the second day, with no food or water, some men started hallucinating. Others, dying of thirst, swallowed seawater.
Within an hour, 2 hours after drinking salt water, they just died.
These horrors repeated themselves for 3 more days. Then a plane. After 5 days in the open sea, the survivors of the U.S.S. Indianapolis were accidentally found, just in time.
We had got to the point of giving up, but we still had faith in the Lord. And that's very, very powerful, very powerful.
Of the 1,197 men aboard the U.S.S. Indianapolis, only 317 survived. 14 of those who perished were from Colorado. Today, Paul Murphy is among only 53 of the original crew still living. Yet at age 87, he often thinks of his shipmates from long ago and remembers with pride that their ordeal aboard the U.S.S. Indianapolis brought the war to an end and allowed American forces in Europe to return home.
Because of the atomic bomb, those men were never transferred to the Pacific. We saved a lot of the European veterans' lives.
When Paul Murphy and his shipmates were floating at sea, fearing they'd never be rescued, they had no idea what part they played in ending World War II, and neither did Americans back home. The mission and tragedy of the U.S.S. Indianapolis wouldn't become a celebrated story of heroism for years to come. When we come back, a look at Vietnam and a man exempt from military service, yet determined to serve his country. Has never been a comfortable topic. It conjures images of discord at home and of young lives lost in a war bogged down by politics. Because of all the controversy, those who fought in the jungles of Vietnam came to rely more heavily on one another, even if their backgrounds were a world apart. Among its many nicknames, the war in Vietnam is often called the Helicopter War. In 1969, two young men came to Vietnam to fly those helicopters, specifically the Boeing CH-46 Sea Knight.
Each one of those engines, I think, was about 1,500 horsepower.
They weren't agile, but they were crucial workhorses.
We carried about 4,500 pounds worth of internal load. There were 24 combat seats in there.
Today, Walt Wise is no longer in the military, but still uses his piloting skills here in Colorado. Back in the 60s, he was just a kid when he took the controls of an 11-ton helicopter a half a world away.
Flying helicopters is more fun than anything because you're never more than about 1,000 feet above the ground. A helicopter has the best visibility of any aircraft I've ever flown.
How'd you end up in Vietnam?
I was just trying to stay ahead of the draft and a few other things.
William Patrick Higgins had a different motivation for volunteering for Vietnam. His dad had died in World War II. And friends say Bill was trying to make a connection with a father he never knew. But because of his father's death and the fact he was an only child, he was exempt from the draft. He didn't have to serve. Bill Higgins could have been a lawyer. So if he had a law degree, he didn't really have to choose to be a pilot.
No, they would have made him a JAG officer in a heartbeat, and he could have flown a desk for his entire career.
Instead, Bill Higgins and Walt Wise flew in the same unit in Vietnam, the Purple Foxes. Their missions were as varied as the Vietnam terrain.
The medevac mission is probably one of the best things that you can do with a helicopter. You could save their lives, and we saved a lot of lives.
The most difficult missions involved helping Marines who were surrounded, outnumbered, and under fire.
Generally expect to take fire if you get over the edge of the hills here.
These guys would go out and they would, try to get intelligence and recon, but they also would occasionally bite off more than they could chew, which time they needed emergency extraction.
When you're pinned down, there's nothing sweeter than the sound of a rescue helicopter. A sound that often drew fire away from those on the ground.
They'd shoot the noise, or especially at night, they could hear that these things make a lot of noise.
The Purple Fox's goal was to support the troops, not engage the enemy. But that hardly kept the enemy from attacking the helicopters.
We didn't have aces, we had reverse aces. We had guys that had been shot down 5 times. Our outlook on life was considerably different than one of our, top gun pilots.
And that outlook darkened each time a helicopter team didn't come home.
When we first got word that he was missing, people were running around saying, well, gee, maybe Bill put it down on the beach. Maybe they stopped somewhere.
It was just 3 days after Christmas, 1969, and Bill Higgins was co-piloting a night supply mission.
We were pretty close-knit, and somebody went down. you knew about it right away.
The weather was bad, the visibility was worse, and Bill's radio was on the blink.
Air traffic, they tried to call him 3 or 4 times and tell him, you know, you need to turn left, you got a mountain at your 12 o'clock, that's your same altitude, and they never acknowledged.
Bill Higgins and 9 other Americans crashed into a mountain and High Van Pass. No one survived.
After the crash, we had a memorial service there at Marble, and pretty intense. There was a lot of bonding, you know, among the crew members.
Heartbreaking for friends like Walt, but beyond comprehension for Bill Higgins' mother. Dorothy Higgins' sacrifices are unimaginable. She lost her husband in World War II and her only child in Vietnam. Dorothy Higgins died in 2002. She died on Memorial Day.
In honor of Bill Higgins, friends and family, including his mother, have set up a scholarship at his alma mater, the University of Iowa Law School. When we come back, we'll take you to a conflict still going on today.